Do me a favor, share with me your first, last name, where you're located, and the name of your book and or business.
My name is Maria Garaitonandia. You say that as if you're giving directions to go right to Nandia. I am located in beautiful Orlando,
Mm.
and I have just finished writing a book. It's yet to be published called Untangling Communication, a complete leadership guide.
Please share with me more about your book and the business.
My, I guess my passion has always been to help people understand each other a little better. Growing up, my dad was transferred to a bunch of different countries. So I was always the new kid every couple of years and in different places. And I made my share of mistakes. So one of the things you have to learn if you want to be accepted is learn how to talk the way that people will receive it better, whether it's learning what the local jargon is or picking up on a few accents or even a language.
Yeah.
Not only that, but also being able to adjust your style.
Yeah.
So, as an adult, what I have been doing for the last 25 years is working with teams and leaders, mostly in a corporate environment, to help them untangle a lot of those communication challenges that they face, whether it's intercultural issues or whether it's managing conflict or whether it's figuring out how to give somebody feedback without alienating
Mhm. Mhm.
them, but rather encouraging them. So, all of these little delicate things that could sometimes trip us up,
Yeah.
those are the things that I have found that I can help people with and that I'm most passionate about.
What challenge do you see them facing most often?
Well, just like you said, Javanka, it's the idea there is that even though something might work really well for you in one context, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily, you're not going to cut and paste it in every situation. I think that leaders who are most successful are those who have the situational awareness
Mm.
where they know that just by, again, observing stuff that I had to learn from an early age, by observing, interpreting, adjusting, if you can do that, it'll make your life so much easier because you have to be able to give the person the message in the way that they will be most receptive to it so that you can actually move forward, so that you can actually create that sense of solidarity, of teamwork, etc. So being very much, on the, I guess, on the lookout for any kind of clues that might give you an idea as to how to adjust your message. That will make or break your leadership style.
Yes, yes. And I just had this random question come in my head. Of course, when you want a job, you go for an interview, right? And then in that interview, you ask all these questions. I wonder how much about communication is in this interview to at least get to know the person you're about to hire. Does that make sense?
Do you do you mean like how much you can figure out from a
Yes.
person?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good question because you have limited time. And a lot of people also tell me, they're like, well, it gets easier if you know somebody because okay, this person's a little more results oriented. You got to speak to them in language that reflects that. But what do you do when it's somebody that you're just starting to meet? And
Mhm.
again, your powers of observation might be quicker or maybe a little slower,
Mm.
but one of the things that I always suggest is asking open ended questions that will
Yes.
give you a lot more richness
Yeah.
in the answers that it elicits from the responder
Yes.
rather than, yes or no questions or guided questions.
Makes sense. I guess I just think about it as I went into interviews for myself. I'm like, if we took a little bit longer, maybe you'd get to know, like you said, the open-ended questions and allowing me to answer accordingly. However, I do realize that sometimes one-on-one is usually a lot shorter, but a panel, in my mind, I'm thinking, what if they had like a someone that's like a that'll sit there and be quiet and try to look into it and learn a little bit about their move, all of that stuff. I don't know. It was just something that was random, but I wonder how easier would that make it when when they're actually onboarding and then choosing to understand where they are in order to guide them in the direction that's needed for the business as well as for themselves. So it was just random.
For sure, for sure. And I think that, people say, well, nowadays you don't talk about soft skills because the soft skills label has gotten a bad rap. But ultimately, whatever you call them, whether you call them soft skills, power skills, interpersonal intelligence skills, these interpersonal intelligence skills are super important because they're the ones that we actually are looking for, that emotional intelligence that you might have, being
Mhm.
able to stop and postpone reacting, being able to realize what you're feeling,
Yeah.
being able to take that step and change the narrative in your head. Because I mean, I don't know, I think sometimes people jump a little too quickly. They're like, oh, you did this and that means that.
Mhm.
Well, you know what? Maybe that's not what they meant. And maybe they didn't mean to, offend you. Sometimes we have different filters, right? And I was just doing a cross cultural training and I talked to people. I'm like, you grow up with a certain filter. This is how you see life. And it's not objective, it's subjective. We all have a subjective filter. And sometimes you run into somebody who has a different color filter than you. And when you look at their behavior through your own filter, you're like, what?
Yeah.
But you have to realize that everybody has their own logic as to why they're behaving, how they're behaving. They have different set of parents with maybe a different culture or family culture, whatever, that makes perfect logical sense to them. So you
Mhm.
have to get to a point where you can kind of, have the green filter, be able to understand,
Yes.
where they're coming from. And that's what I mean sometimes by the situational awareness, to be
Yeah.
able to say, okay, maybe you didn't really, this came across this way. Is that what you really meant? Because
Yes.
I don't really think that's what you meant. And then
Yes.
being able to give people the benefit of the doubt and have richer dialogues instead of like, self censoring or being, making mistakes that you don't even realize that you're making.
I understand that you've created a model, the CLEAR model for improving communication. Is that correct?
Yes. After so many years, like 20 some years of answering much of the same questions,
Mhm. Mhm.
and finding that a lot of people had a lot of the same issues,
Yes.
I pretty much came up with an acronym that kind of covers a lot of these issues, kind of like a situational management
Okay.
model. That stands for conveying context. So starting out with giving a little explanation of where you're at or your why. This is my situation. And so that way you're extending the courtesy to somebody of taking them with you through your reasoning. So starting with a little bit of context, it you win half the battle already.
Okay.
So context first, then simultaneously you need to listen and empathize.
Mhm.
So kind of like opening asking those open-ended questions, having a little bit of the empathy, imagining changing that narrative, having that emotional intelligence to be like, okay, maybe this is where they're coming from. So when you're listening, open-ended questions, and you're empathizing with their point of view, that makes it a lot easier too. And then the last two steps are AR. So we got convey context, listen, empathize, adjust, and reframe. So once you have all that info, you've been able to be a little bit more empathetic, you're able to adjust because now you have new information,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then you're able to reframe in a positive way. Hopefully now you can think of the even better if or how about, and so you can come up with solutions just by reframing what you've already figured out in a more positive way.
Makes sense. Got it. Got it. So clear. Conveying context, listen, emphasize, adjust, and refrain.
Exactly.
I like it. I like
Yep.
it. With that being said, I would definitely love to know, being that you've been in this field for about 25 years, and it seems like you're only just getting better and learning more, especially with communication now that a lot of things are done over Zoom and Google Meet, etc. Um, Tell me about your vision.
My vision, when it comes to my clients, my vision is, especially with AI and like you said, all of this technology, my vision is to help people make sure that they are not forgetting the importance of this interpersonal intelligence skills,
Yes.
to not push aside because it's sometimes it can be messy or uncomfortable, because that's pretty much what we're holding on to as human beings now that AI is pretty much doing a lot of other stuff for us.
Yeah.
So I always try to encourage people, look, don't delegate too terribly much. Don't be afraid
Yeah.
to get out of your comfort zone, because ultimately that's what makes us human and that's what kind of distinguishes us. I don't know. I don't even, I mean, we can't even think of what's going to be down the line, even 3 years from now, because we're probably going to be talking to holograms instead, right? I don't know. But, but yeah, especially I encourage Gen Z, especially they had the bulk of the isolation during the pandemic and kind of lost out on a lot of these skills, the
Yes.
face-to-face skills, and they're needing a little extra help in the last couple of years in
Mhm.
catching up on some of these skills. But some of the older generation, we've kind of picked up on some bad habits too. So it's really important to not forget to make those connections, to be able to discern when is it okay to continue asynchronous, texting or writing, and when it's the moment to just grab the phone or connect with someone face to face.
Yeah. Yes.
Because sometimes we're just spinning our wheels going in circles and it's not, we're wasting time, energy, effort. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm seeing.
Yes. And interesting you brought up the pandemic, and I mean the world completely changed, and I don't believe, for myself, as in the age of 46, I think that I got a bit disconnected myself, and all those relational or interpersonal skills that I used to have were not as utilized. One thing I will say is that some of us that did have the opportunity to continue working throughout that, it still put a little fear in us. And so, as you worked in this field during the pandemic, what was that like for you to work with community, to work in communication for someone to do better or to get better in the corporate environment?
Well, I can tell you on the one hand, as a corporate coach, consultant, trainer, fortunately, I was able to just transition my face-to-face
Yeah.
events, work, meetings, and so forth into virtual. So
Yes.
I was lucky in that sense. But I can tell you that I have observed what the difference has been. I've noticed that obviously people's attention spans have decreased significantly in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, Young people especially, and there's this book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, who's a sociologist, and he talks about Gen Z and a lot of the anxiety and what constant scrolling and all of that does to the brain.
Exactly.
So yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, if you notice, do you sit through a 10-minute video? I mean, a lot of people won't even sit through 10 minutes, right?
That's right.
So that I've noticed, for example, meetings or sessions or programs have to be a lot shorter.
Yeah.
They have to be a lot more dynamic.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
and but that said, I can tell you that I think that people do enjoy when we do have the opportunity to meet in
Mhm.
person.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
People really enjoy that, and I've gotten a lot of clients telling me, you know what, we need team building, because a lot of colleagues, they don't even know each other, and it gets even worse if you don't even turn your camera on.
Yes.
So you're talking to initials. You
Yes.
don't
Yes.
even know who
Yes.
that person is. How are you going to create? a connection? How are you going to create rapport
Mhm.
if you don't even know what the person looks like and they're just this abstract concept?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's where, again, I'm going back to it's important to create those very human connections. There's a need for that. And you will probably work better with
Mhm.
somebody whose face you've seen or can see,
Yeah,
with somebody who you've had a chance to interact more than just on an email here or there, or a call with the initials, because there's a sense of, I guess there's a natural sense of connection, of
mhm.
affinity, of empathy, and it'll make things flow a lot easier. And it's not
Absolutely.
just a nice to have. I think it's important. It's an important must have at some point to meet people, at very least
Yes.
virtually on a camera, ideally face to face.
Yes, yes. And when you said the initials and no one's on the screen, I thought about and their best picture ever that probably doesn't look like them anymore. So you're like,
Years
oh,
ago.
who's this? Because I know I chose my best picture ever. So I was like, yeah, just a still photo. But yes, exactly. And I think that I mean, so many things have changed as, we had that discussion about the pandemic and things that we never thought would ever happen as we get back into normal, I too enjoy just a face-to-face conversation. But also once, as you mentioned with the still photo and the initials, you also don't see anyone's body language. And then, I'm that type of person that I could, if I see your body language and then I can hear what you're saying, something that could be said when you're just in a still photo could have been taken wrong when I
Exactly.
seen something in your face that was a little bit different, that was maybe a question and not accusatory. So I totally get it. And something about communication, I could talk about this all day because I think it's just super important. And I really, really, really would love for Gen Z to get back, to be taught that because I think it's just super important. And the work that you're doing is super important. The work that you're doing seems a little bit challenging in my eyes because communication's really hard. And I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to ask one last question. What's your why?
My why is because I love people.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
why I love people.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.